Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everybody, it's Jory Rose. Welcome back to this week's episode in which I'm going to be talking a lot about self-care. September is Self-Care Awareness Month, and it couldn't come at a better time. And stay tuned to the very end of the episode because I am going to be giving you not just a lot of information about self-care and why it matters, but towards the end, I will be giving you some tips and tools that anyone can implement immediately to start making a shift in their mental, emotional, and physical wellness. And as we know, with the times that we're living in, we all need to take care of ourselves. Because if we aren't taking care of ourselves, we cannot take care of those around us. And this is exactly the reason why I'm so passionate about the parenting membership that I've started, which, by the way, as I release this episode, it's going to be September 7th, and the doors are closing on that parenting membership to be able to help you mindfully manage all of the COVID-related struggles that you and your families are dealing with. The doors are closing September 15th. So if you're interested, if you want to be able to jump on board to get these tools and resources that, again, I know so many families are in desperate need of, be sure to go visit joryrose.com. Under offerings, you can look up the parenting membership or look at the links in the show notes, and you'll have access to all the information. Because here is what I know for certain. Things are not getting easier. We are in an even deeper midst of pandemic fatigue, which is manifesting in all sorts of different ways for families really around the world. But I know here in the US where people are really just wanting it to be over, and yet COVID isn't over. And people are wanting to get back to normal, and yet the numbers keep rising. Especially you see in colleges, the numbers right now, I think in the top 10 areas in the US in which we're seeing an increase in COVID numbers are in college towns. So, we are really going to have to get used to the fact that this right now, what we're in the midst of, this is our new normal. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you've been hearing me say that acceptance is one of the key ways that we can help get through all this. Because if we keep wishing and hoping to go back to the way things were, or we keep having fear and anxiety about what's to come, we're going to increase our struggle, increase our suffering. So outside of acceptance as being one of the keys to managing all that we have going on in the world around us, self-care is going to be one of the things that is going to help us manage on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to share some personal stories right now. I'm a marriage and family therapist. Since COVID has hit, I've taken on almost double the amount of my client load. And as you can imagine, I've taken on so many clients because the suffering has increased. People are needing help. People are needing resources. And I'm really good about holding boundaries for myself with my clients, and I very rarely feel like, being taken over by carrying the stress of others. And that's not to say it still doesn't happen. And about 2 weeks ago, I was hitting a breaking point. I live in Northern California. We are in an early onset of fire season, which is a really horrifically new pattern for us Californians. It's daunting and it's scary. And not only that, even if you're not near the fires, it's literally in the air. It's palpable. The air quality in the town that I live in was literally the worst air quality in the entire world 2 weeks ago. And we were still within 10 miles away from the fire, so we weren't in imminent danger, but it's in the air. And whether or not it's, fire related, there's a lot of palpable energy in the air that is causing us extra added stress and anxiety. And on this particular day, when the air quality was at the worst and there was a threat of more lightning storms, I just hit a breaking point. And I felt myself get really anxious. I felt myself get really antsy. I felt my stress levels begin to rise. And for a large part, it was all of these things that were in the environment in which I couldn't control, which were daunting and overwhelming, which was beginning to affect my ability to be present, my ability to relax, my ability to be with my kids in a way that I was present. That was all being compromised because the palpability in the air of what was going on around me it was too much. And I needed to get out of here. And I don't think I've ever had that reaction before where it was just, I need to remove myself from the environment in which I'm in because it was too much. And what the key of what I want to point out is, now understand, not everyone's going to have the ability to pick up and go to, someplace different when it gets hard. But the key here is that I knew myself well enough to really understand what was going on inside of me. And the fact that it wasn't just push harder, do more of the same. It was a deep knowledge and deep wisdom that I need to do something different right now to take care of myself. And what can that look like? And again, I know not everyone's going to have the flexibility or availability financially or otherwise to be able to do this. But for us, we went to Southern California, found a very reasonable VRBO house, and was able to do work and remote learning from a different location. So it's not a matter of what I did. It's a matter of the process I went through of honoring, how can I take care of myself right now? How can I unapologetically name this need to my partner in a way in which he is going to validate my anxieties, validate my concerns, support me in the self-care, which was really for my family, so we could all breathe some fresh air. But I was a little bit nervous to share that need. I was a little bit anxious that it might get shut down, or I might just get told, don't worry, everything's going to be fine, calm down, relax, no need to stress. And that might have been the case in previous relationships where I might not have been validated for that need to do something different, to take care of the stress I was under. And I'm so grateful that I'm in a partnership and relationship now in which that was immediately recognized and immediately went into action to how can we take care of you so you can continue to take care of the people around you. And I was so grateful for that. And so in whatever which way this looks for you right now, whether it's getting some alone time, whether it's taking a bubble bath, going for a walk if you have fresh air where you live, whether it's knowing how to just unapologetically name your needs, name your boundaries. Like I said, whatever it is, it's got to start with awareness. Because here's the thing. I'm working with so many clients right now, and I see the stress levels increasing and the anxiety increasing and the depression increasing. And part of it is the difficulty in accepting where we are. But a big piece of what I see going on is a struggle in being able to name to the people around us what we're experiencing and that maybe we need some support in a different way. And I'm going to be generalized here. And the majority of people I see struggling the most in naming this is women and in moms. And I see across the board that women struggle with practicing self-care. And there's a lot of really good and valid excuses for this. They feel that they've got no time. Perhaps they don't have any support from any other family members or friends when they've got their kids and they've got to manage everything. So quite realistically for many women, this could be, everything could be burdened on their shoulders. Or if they do have a partner, a co-parent, a spouse, oftentimes patterns of communication in relationships can be really difficult, especially at times of stress. And there may be an inability to communicate clearly that this is really hard for them and they need some support. And maybe this is something to bring awareness to. And my hopes in this podcast episode is to really give some guidance, some support, some compassion for all the stress that everyone is experiencing right now, so we can gain some better tools to collectively decrease what is going on around us. Another area in which I see women really, really struggle with self-care is this belief that to practice self-care makes them selfish, or that they feel guilty for taking care of themselves. So I invite you, as you're listening, and even if you're not a woman or a mother, be curious about what is your mindset around self-care. And let me ask you for just a moment. Let's break this down a little bit further. When you think about self-care, what comes to mind? Because I know when I've asked this question many times when given trainings, it often is answered in a very physical health sort of way. That to take care of myself, I've got to get a good night's sleep, eat a well-balanced diet, exercise, don't drink too much, don't smoke, don't do drugs. And so this physical aspects of our self-care is just one piece of the pie. So what I want to bring greater awareness to is the self-care for your emotional and mental wellness. Because if you could be doing everything on your physical aspect of eating right and exercise and getting a good night's sleep, but if your emotions and your thoughts are taking you to a dark place, preventing you from finding the joy, preventing you from being present, preventing gratitude from coming into your daily life, preventing you from having self-compassion or compassion from others, it doesn't matter how good of a good night's sleep you're getting. So we'll talk more about this in a few moments. But another aspect of what I want to bring up is where I often see, especially women, struggle with this idea of self-care is the stories they're telling themselves on what it means to be a good mom. And as I work with more women and mothers, there is a pervasive belief of this mom as martyr mindset. And this could be coming from a few different ways. Quite possibly it's what we were role modeled from our moms who grew up in the 50s and they saw that being role modeled by their mothers. And as our mothers grew up, they were kind of perhaps at the cusp of whether or not they were still a stay-at-home mom or whether or not they had careers. And even if they did, it might have been a generational and social norm at the time for the husbands and the dads to, their roles and responsibilities were to go to work and the mom was to take care of the kids. Well, in that model, in that traditional model, no matter what else the mom took care of in her life, whether it was a career, elderly parents, volunteering in the community, volunteering at, places of worship or in the schools, and they often took care of the home, all the meals, the laundry, the shopping, the cleaning, as well as the kids. And then once mothers began into the workforce, this was known as the second shift, in which they'd go to work and they'd come home and still have all of those home responsibilities. And so as we now saw our mothers balance all of this, so many women I've spoken to had the perception that their mothers did it all with ease. And I've also spoken to so many clients who can describe their mothers as, oh my God, my mom was amazing. She did everything for everyone. She never took a second for herself. She was this incredible woman, and she was always there for her kids and her grandkids and her husband, whatever they needed. And as I hear people talk about mothers in their lives, I feel I want to hold space for two aspects. One is, this is an amazing woman. This is a woman who has put her family first. And as I also hear that, it makes me a little bit sad because I hear a woman who is exhausted. I hear in that, kind of little vignette I just painted, a woman who doesn't know how to put herself first, or perhaps she's tried and has been shut down from others in not supporting her and taking care of her own needs. So I invite you to just get really curious about what is the story you're telling yourself of what does it mean to be a good mom, to be a productive woman. Whether or not you have children, this idea still gets permeated through our culture and our society. And this idea of, mom as martyr, is that really the best image that we want to uphold ourselves to, as someone who puts everybody else first at the sake of herself? And while that may have worked at a certain point in time and maybe a perhaps simpler life, right now, that model does not work. And so the women that I work with that are striving to live up to this mom as martyr model, which let me tell you, I would say it is somewhere between 50 and 70% of my client base. And not only my clients, but women that I interact with in social media, people who I see posting different posts or I'm in different groups with. So, if as you're listening, if you're feeling maybe some guilt or shame as you say to yourself, yeah, that's me. I do put everybody else first. And perhaps this is the moment for awareness to say, and it's not working anymore. Because the more we continue to push harder, doesn't necessarily make things easier, and it doesn't necessarily create the patterns you want to be living in. I think that COVID has really given us the wake-up call to say, all right, you guys, it's time for some new patterns because the old way of living wasn't working, and we need to slow down and we need to hit the reset button. And perhaps many of you believe that the old way was working, but there was a lot of things in our culture, in our society, and in our homes that were not running smoothly. And what was working was that it was familiar. It was predictable and it was known. But there are many factors in our culture and society that were not working. And it is my deep, deep, deep hope that with COVID, we are taking this time to reset and to realign with our values and to decide how do we want to live consciously moving forward. Because as I continue to see this pattern of women as martyr, as women not putting themselves first and taking care of their own needs, if you are a parent, one of the things that I really question and want to bring curiosity to is, how do you want to role model to your kids? Because, depending on how we're showing up, we are reinforcing this belief that taking care of yourself is selfish if you have others to take care of. And if you've got sons, what is this role model to their future partners as them being husbands? And if you got daughters, what is this role model to them as future mothers and wives? And breaking patterns is never easy. And right now, more than ever, I see it is necessary. Because consider for a moment, what is the impact of you not practicing self-care? What is the impact of you not putting yourself first? Not in a way that's selfish and not in a way that is denying the needs of the people around you. And I hate to be a cliche, but there is that statement that is said at the beginning of when you're getting the instructions on the airplane, that if in case of an emergency to put your oxygen mask on yourself before those around you. And I remember being a kid and never understanding that. Why would I not put it on my child first? But the more I understood the intention, of course that makes perfect sense. Because if I'm not getting the breath and oxygen I need, I am not available to help anybody else around me. And that's what was happening to me a couple weeks ago, where I needed to find where can I get my oxygen right now. And luckily I was able to pick up and go out of town for a couple of days. But we can look for it in a variety of different ways, because the impact of not practicing self-care is increasing our mental and emotional depletion. And at the time of this pandemic, if we're really wanting to stay healthy and boost our immune system, it is time to put our mental and emotional health at a top priority, as you would your physical health. And this is, again, Like everything I teach, it is so much easier said than done, but without awareness and without conscious practice towards creating the space for it, it'll never happen. So let's consider for a moment talking about how to implement more self-care into your life. Think about the various ways in which that could look for you. What would it mean for you to take care of yourself? And maybe it'd be different on a different day. Maybe it's not always going to be the same answer. But what does self-care really mean if you were to implement? Is it finding some alone time? Is it drawing boundaries? Is it unapologetically naming your needs? Is it asking your kids to solve the problem on their own before coming to you? Is it telling your partner you need more help around the house? Is it asking for it again and again until it becomes a new pattern? Or is it simply just honoring within yourself? Can I let it be okay that I can't handle all of this right now? Can I enter into some deeper self-compassion and give myself the embrace that this is really, really hard right now, that we are being asked to manage more than we've ever had to take on at a time in which the stakes are really high. This pandemic is not going anywhere anytime soon, and our ability to move through our day-to-day life is going to continue to be compromised for a bit. So the more that we push up against what we're fighting hard against, the harder we're going to have. So the more we can come into acceptance to create some new patterns, to create some new ways of operating, the smoother time we're going to have. And again, I know I say it over and over and over again. It is easier said than done. But it does not change until you have the self-compassionate awareness of what you need, and to unapologetically name it to those around you. And I find that I sometimes have a little bit of fear or anxiety about naming it because it's very vulnerable. There's a fear of vulnerability that if I name my need, it may not be accepted. And then I'm going to feel shut down, or I have a fear of judgment. What will they think of me if I express that I can't hold it all together right now? What will they think of me if I need some time away from the kids, even if it's just an hour? Where can I begin to find that time on a logistical standpoint? And then logistically, where can I go? What can it look like? Because I know for me, one of the acts of self-care that I used to love was going and getting my nails done, because for an hour and a half every other week, that forced me to sit and slow down and do nothing. Or maybe it was getting a massage once a month, or going to one of those reflexology places for my feet. So in absence of this physical self-care of having someone nurture my body or take care of some of those needs like getting my nails done, I've got to be creative in finding new ways to look for it. But until I honor that I need it, and until I really request from the people around me and begin to, get curious about the resistance that may arise, and then unapologetically explain that for me to show up and to be there to take care of you, I've got to take care of me. And continue to hold and draw that boundary anytime it begins to get crossed. And let me tell you, your kids, ultimately, even if they're in resistance of it at first, will respect you for it later. I know there's things that I used to have an old mindset around being a mom, that I, literally did everything for my kids. This was, kind of that mom as martyr mentality, that I was with my kids all the time, that I didn't want to spend time away from them by, going on a vacation by myself, like for a retreat or a conference. And the amazing thing is, as my kids have gotten older, they have expressed to me that they appreciate that I have done these things, and that it's inspired them to do things in different ways because they see me taking care of myself and of my passions and of the work that I'm doing. And it's given them the permission to do the same. So September is Self-Care Awareness Month. I'm going to keep talking a lot more about this. This is going to be a big component of my parenting membership. That is, doors close on September 15th. So if you are wanting more access into resources to how to create a more peaceful and productive home environment, because as I've said, emotions are contagious. If you're stressed and overwhelmed, your kids are going to be stressed and overwhelmed, which is not going to be a conducive environment for focus, for attention, for learning, when often both parents and kids are at home for working from home and distance learning. And I want to bring in one more other aspect around this. I really encourage you guys, if you don't already, to subscribe and listen to the Brene Brown podcast, Unlocking Us. So much of her work is so brilliant, and I love when I hear some of her podcast episodes that are in alignment with what I'm teaching and in my work. And the one that she released last week was the first episode of her second season. And it's all about what she calls day 2. And she refers to this as when she would give 3-day trainings on shame and guilt and vulnerability, that day 2 was always the hardest. Day 2 was the day in which there was the point of no return, which you're too far in it to turn back, but you're not quite yet close enough to be done. And this is what we're in the midst of with COVID. We are in the midst of one big day 2, where we're so far in it, life is not going back to the way it was, and yet we don't know when it's going to end. And day 2 is really the shittiest, hardest time of being stuck in the mud. It's that purgatory of not knowing. And the not knowing is always harder than the knowing, because it's in the not knowing we don't know how to plan. We don't know what to prepare. There's a lack of predictability or normalcy or hope for us to hold on to, all of which could lead to a deeper depression. So day 2 is what we're in. We are in the midst. There's a beginning, middle, and end to everything, and there will be an end. It'll be a new normal on the other side. And so right now, in the middle of it, this is where I feel that not only is it the hardest, but the greatest opportunity for our growth. Because we can use our awareness of where we're struggling, and we can do one of two things with that awareness. We can either go into some self-criticism or shame or judgment on how we are not handling things, or we can use this as insight for deeper compassion and awareness for what are some new tools and strategies and mindsets I can adopt to get through this. And again, we are breaking free of some really old pervasive patterns and thoughts around how we're supposed to be taking care of everyone around us. And I'm here to tell you, I invite you to put yourself first unapologetically. Now, putting yourself first does not mean neglecting or ignoring the needs of those who rely on you. It simply is honoring that if you are not able mentally, emotionally, and physically to be present, to be honoring your own thoughts and emotions, your own anxieties and sadness and fears, then you are doing a disservice of those around you, because then you're not showing up authentically. You know, I've shared this experience before, but I want to share it again because I think it really is fitting. That some of the reasons, especially moms, struggle with naming their needs of unapologetically is because there's this belief that we should just always put on a happy face. That if we have a happy face, then my kids and everyone in my home will be happy, and then everything will be good. The problem with that is there's often really good reason to not always be happy. And I think to just try to put on that happy face and try to get everyone to just have a happy face teaches them to push down their emotions, their thoughts and fears and anxieties and stress, to push it down and just to pretend like it's not there. And I know that it's really vulnerable to show up and express your emotions. And in doing so, you role model to others how to do the same. And a couple months ago when COVID first hit, and I had this really bad day. There was an opportunity that didn't come through. I was looking through. I had a really tough day of clients, but the kicker was my oldest daughter got some sad news that some of the plans that she was prepared to embark on for her upcoming year were being canceled due to COVID. And that just kind of put me over the edge. And I sat down on my meditation cushion in my office at home and I just started crying. And I needed that release. I was sad. I was frustrated. I was overwhelmed. I was a little bit angry at the world of all of these things that were happening. And I just sat there and cried. And my daughter, who is 16, came into the room and saw me crying. And she said, "Mom, what's wrong?" It could have been a very typical pattern for many parents to respond by saying, "Oh, honey, nothing. It's fine. I'm going to be okay. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about me. I'm just fine." But that's not what I did. And instead I said, "Wow, you know what, sweetie? I'm really overwhelmed and I'm really sad. And this is all just really hard right now. And this is just too much to carry." And you know what she did? She said, "Mom, come here. Let me hold you." And she literally took me in her arms and I laid my head on her shoulder and I cried. It was so incredibly comforting. But not only was it comforting, it was this really beautiful connection point in which I showed up authentically to my daughter. She responded with beautiful compassion. I showed up as real. It would be weird for me to not express any emotion for all that was going on. But most importantly, I role modeled to her, it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel like you can't carry it all. It's okay to want to put down the cup, as I say. If you don't know that reference, I'll do another podcast episode about it. But it's this idea that we don't have to keep carrying what's heavy. And most importantly, later on that night, she came down to me and she was crying and she said, "Mom, I'm really sad." Whereas earlier in that day, when she got the news about her canceled plans, she really tried to hold a stiff lip and to hold it together and say, "I'm bummed, but it's okay." Which I knew she had to be feeling more. And it wasn't until I authentically and very vulnerably expressed myself that I believed was the direct line to give her more permission to really express herself. That to me is self-care. Naming what's arising, expressing it, not feeling guilty or shamed for not being able to hold it together all the time. Because my guess is if you've been taking care of the people around you, my guess is that they really want to take care of you too. And my guess that if you really were able to share where you were at, that people would step up. Even kids. So, I've seen so many Facebook posts that the first couple of days of remote learning seemed to come with a little bit more ease for people. People were posting their pictures of their kids in their workspace, taking their first day of school pictures of their kids in their pajamas at the front door. And now that it's been for a couple of weeks, and I know some of you haven't started school yet, that usually starts after Labor Day, but in California, most everyone is in school. And I saw a big shift occur at the end of this week with those Facebook posts. It was all of a sudden this huge influx of moms posting, "I can't hold my shit together anymore. I'm beginning to lose it." My kids who maybe have some learning challenges or ADHD can't do remote learning. Or my kids who are super social are struggling with not knowing how to make friends because they're not around other kids. Or multiple kids in different ages in which the parent needs to be present to help them stay focused on remote learning. I mean, there's layers and layers, but I saw a big shift in these Facebook posts in which moms went from saying, "Oh yeah, this isn't going to be so bad," to "I am now losing my shit. How long can I do this for?" Well, we're in day 2, as Brene Brown says. And so rather than resist or enter into judgment or any guilt or shame of what you're not able to handle, let's look to how can I respond differently. So I just implore any of you listening, consider the ways in which you can bring more self-care into your day-to-day life. Use this as a topic of conversation with your families. Ask your kids about their self-care. What is it you need to be able to manage your mental and emotional wellness so you can show up more presently for others? How can you delegate responsibility? How can you unapologetically name when it's too much to carry? And most importantly, what is the boundary you can set to honor yourself as these things come up? So September is Self-Care Awareness Month. I'll be talking a lot more about it. If you are needing extra assistance for managing the stress in your home due to all the COVID-related struggles, please check out my parenting membership. Doors close September 15th. I know it's going to be a beautiful resource for so many people, and I don't want you to miss out. These doors aren't going to reopen until January, so if you don't get on now, you're going to be on a wait list for a few months. And I'm so passionate about providing these tools because I know families need it. And I know that you're not alone. At times it feels like you're alone, but I want to help create the community of support to say, nope, we got you. And here's what you can do. And so to begin, at the very least, look for moments in your day to slow down and breathe. This is the ultimate foundation of self-care, is finding your breath, which is hard to access when you're in the midst of the breakdown, when you're stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, frustrated. The breath is harder to access. So the more times throughout your day you can look for the moments to slow down and take 3 to 5 to 10 mindful breaths, that is slowly breathing in through your nose, slowly exhaling out through your mouth. By doing so, you activate the calming part of your brain, building up the foundation for you to access this breath when you need it. So at the very, very, very least, take a minute and just breathe. It's not going to change what's arising, but it's going to change your ability to respond to what's arising. And that is the key. That is self-care. So, all right, you guys, check out the links in the show notes for any of the offerings. Take a minute and just breathe. Look for and name what your self-care needs are. Unapologetically express them to others. Hold a boundary. Honor yourself. Whatever you're feeling is valid and real. We're in the midst of day 2 and it's hard. And pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It doesn't have to be that hard when you can find the ways to take care of yourself. So be well, and I will tune in with you guys next week. All right, take care.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.